Just one thing I wanted to mention in this, the sort of idea of community is so important if you're working in a startup, because it becomes all-consuming and it's your life, and it can be very lonely. So it's really cool to see things like this and having communities of like-minded people come together. Didn't really have it as I've been on that journey, so it's lovely to see. So I'm here to talk a little bit about crossing the so-called valley or Grand Canyon of death. But first, I have a lovely disclaimer, because as you might see here, oh, can't get out of the green box, NASDAQ, Lanza, we are a listed company. We're a public company. And with being a public company, all the fun things also come with lots of restrictions and lots of lawyers. So I've met quite a lot of lawyers here today, so you're always going to be well loved by the people in here as they get to scale. So this is about 2 years ago. It was February 2 years ago. See, I'm still wearing the same scarf. I don't get out much. We had been sort of living off coffee and things from vending machines, and this was the moment where we'd finalized all the paperwork and we were finally going public. It was very exciting. Everybody went off to celebrate. I flew back because we're based in Chicago, and I went and slept for about 24 hours and missed everything. But how did we get there? It doesn't just happen overnight. So as Ben said, about 20 years, sometimes joke I'm a middle-aged startup. We've gone through a lot of funding rounds. And as you can see, we've raised a lot of money over the years. And that doesn't just happen. That takes a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and very supportive friends and family. I've had a busy week for about 20 years. And you have to cross this so-called valley of death. And one might say that when you go public, you have another valley of death to cross. It's just different things. But for the purposes of today, I want to talk about our journey and how you can get across that first proving point valley, and how you can raise the funds that you need from A through to whatever round you need to get to go from that lab scale or that discovery stage all the way to your first commercial unit via many pilots and demos and whatever it might be. So what does Lanzatech do? So in a nutshell, when we think about Lanzatech, we think about rethinking carbon. So we know that energy can be carbon-free, but you need a source of carbon for things like fuels and chemicals. So I'm positively dripping in carbon. There is carbon in synthetic fibers that we're wearing and the things we use every day. We probably don't all fly everywhere every day, but we need fuels for lots of things. But where that carbon comes from is going to determine our climate future. And so Lanzatech was really developed on the idea that you can extract that carbon from the ground, or you could recycle above ground carbon that's already there and polluting our atmosphere, polluting our land and water. So we developed a technology, so it's young Freya there, and we developed a technology. We're all biologists, and we thought, well, biology does cool stuff, can harness chaos and create order. So why don't we leverage biology to take pollution, carbon, and turn it into the stuff that we make today from virgin fossil resources? And we thought, well, let's look at nature's carbon recyclers. Sorry about that. And nature's carbon recyclers, trees. They take carbon and they make stuff. There's no waste in nature. If you think about the cherry tree, the blossoms fall down, it becomes sort of nutrients for the next generation of growth. So we had a dream. This is a very picturesque site in New Zealand where we were founded, of a steel mill. And we would pass this steel mill and thought, well, there's a lot of carbon there and it's not doing anything. What happens if we recycled that carbon and made stuff? And so what we did is we thought about something called fermentation. Hands up, anyone who knows what fermentation is, who has a glass of something that's fermented or had a glass of something that's fermented today. So traditional fermentation is sugar and yeast to make alcohol. Well, what we do is we take gases, a carbon in the gas, and we take a biocatalyst, a bacteria, and we ferment the gas to make fuels and chemicals, essentially retrofitting a brewery into something like a steel mill or an emitting site. And that's what we do. And it sounds like science fiction, but cue video. This is actually drone footage of one of our facilities in Belgium at a working steel mill, taking emissions and converting that into fuels and chemicals that can be converted into things like textiles and packaging and things that we use every day. So it's real, and we managed to do it. We also managed to convert some of that fuel into sustainable aviation fuel. And 5 years ago, 7 years ago actually, 2018, we did a flight with Virgin Atlantic from Florida to London using fuel that was made from recycled steel mill emissions. And here are some pictures of items that we've made from recycled steel mill emissions. So not using virgin fossil resources, but actually converting it from pollution. So how did we get from the scrappy little startup in New Zealand to this fancy, highfalutin Nasdaq-listed company? And I just want to point out here, those fridges you can see were taken from a corner shop that was going out of business, and they became our incubators in our borrowed lab space. We now have our own lab space and top-of-the-range equipment, but we weren't like that at the beginning. So what does it take? For many of you on that journey here today, what it takes is a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. We've spent most of our time going out raising cash over the years. And it takes a lot of data. So this is our first investor, so Stephen Tyndall in New Zealand, where we were founded. And he invested in all those rounds that you saw earlier. And with his investment, sort of angel investment, we were able to get enough data to go to California and get venture capital funding from a man called Vinod Khosla. With that money, we were then able to build out our lab and start building our first pilot plant at that beautiful steel mill I showed you earlier. And with that data, we were able to secure our Series B funding in China with strategics and venture capital groups to then build our demo plant in China. And with that data and that money, we were then able to move forward and build our first commercial plant. Fast forward to today, and we have 6 commercial plants operating over all that time with all that money. But it's not easy. And so my lessons to you today are to say, don't let anything stop you. Don't let anybody stop you. It's very easy to say no. I'm sure many of you in this room get told no all the time, be it from partners, investors, customers, you name it. Don't take no for an answer, because otherwise nobody's ever going to move forward. We talked a little bit about the Overton window. Well, I'm just going to turn that a little bit on its head and talk about predictions that have been made, because we were told what we were doing was impossible. So 1943, I think there's a world market for maybe 5 computers. That was the chairman of IBM. And 1981, Bill Gates thought 640K was probably enough memory for anybody. And so the idea here is that if people are saying no, or if it's something that you can't even fathom today, when people heard us tell our story at the beginning, they thought we were crazy. So keep being crazy, but don't just jump to the next curve, be the next curve. So if you think your solution is out there, good. We need out there solutions to make the change. So do something crazy. Steel mills and microbes, everybody thought it was never going to happen, but you've seen today that it was possible. And the last message for you all is 20 years, it's a long time. It does take time. These things don't happen overnight. You are trying to change the world. So have patience as you're doing it. Thank you.